Welcome everyone to Keep It Classy Tech. This video will be the simple change that you can make to an A80J to have all the content look very similar as far as color temperature and white point, and go through all of the settings for each mode that you need. Starting off here in SDR using cinema mode, this is what it looks like, and you're going to get about 200 nits or so. And then in SDR game mode, very similar, as well as getting about 200 nits and about 150 for both in full field measurements. Then for SDR standard mode, which is going to be your bright room, cable viewing, etc., this one's about 400 nits. So you can see the SDR delta air average is somewhere around 1 for all these modes. Again, this is just a very simple settings change. Here we have HDR custom mode. That dip that you see at 70 is completely normal. That's how it's supposed to look. What you're looking at is the RGB balance staying nice and tight all the way through in the EOTF tracking, and that's about 700 nits and then about 165 full field. And then here we have Dolby Vision Dark, which is the accurate one, and again, nice tracking how it should be. Alright, so all of this is with very simple changes. So I'm going to now cut over to the video that I shot going through every single mode and explaining everything along the way, and that's it. Alright, here we go. This is going to be the best recommended settings for the Sony A80J, particularly the 77-inch, but if you have a 65 or 55, go ahead and put them in, try them. Should at least put you in the right direction, a lot better than out of the box as far as color temperature white point goes. And it's a simple setting that will work for all content. So normally in Dolby Vision, dark is the more accurate mode, but when you use dark with an Expert 1 or Expert 2 color temperature, it's going to convert that color temperature to a warmer temperature than if you were to use Expert 1 or Expert 2 on SDR or HDR 10 content. So the way around that is to use the warm color temperature, which is actually very cool. So this setup is going to show you how you can use warm, make it a lot warmer, so that it actually will be very accurate, at least compared to out of the box. So a real calibration will still be better, but aside from getting a real calibration, this is going to be your best bet for all content with a very simple setup. So I'm going to start here with Dolby Vision Dark. All of this you leave alone, don't touch any of it. And if you ever forget, gamma defaults to 0 even though the line says -2. It's a bug. Alright, so we're going to go down to color, and you're going to change color temperature to warm. Very important. Now, after you go through and do all these settings, try it out. If you want to use live color or any of the enhancements, that's up to you. I'm just going to show you how to set this up to be very accurate. But live color, that's a personal preference thing. Use it if you want to. That's up to you. Same thing here. A lot of this is personal preference. Personally, I use reality creation at auto. That way I don't have to keep changing it for different content. I can just set it and forget it. You really don't need noise reduction for Dolby Vision content, and you don't need smooth gradation for Dolby Vision either. Motion, that's completely personal preference. I like smoothness at 1. Don't use clearness with Dolby Vision or HDR because it will reduce the brightness. Cinemotion depends on the content. I've talked about that before. Alright, here's the main change that you have to make for the warm color temperature. Now when you go to advanced color temperature basic, that's your 2-point white balance control, you're going to do -3 green and -15 blue. Sounds like a big change, and it is a big number. However, like I said, warm is very cool actually as far as color temperature goes out of the box. So you need to take out a bunch of blue, a little bit of green, and it's going to be very accurate like that. There is panel variance, but it's going to be a heck of a lot better. This setting is tied to the warm color temperature. So whenever you go to any other picture mode, whether it's an SDR or HDR picture mode, doesn't matter. Whenever you set the warm color temperature, it's going to automatically do this for you. So you only need to do this step one time. And then you're not going to do anything with 20 point. See, these are all default 0. And the same thing with the colors. These are all default 0. Don't touch them, especially in HDR and Dolby Vision. Don't mess with the color settings. And that's it for Dolby Dark. Now, if you like or prefer Dolby Bright, that's up to you. But gonna pretty much do the same thing. Don't touch anything except I suggest you turn on gradation preferred if you're gonna use bright, because it does help it get not quite as bright, but again, personal preference. I wouldn't even use bright to begin with because it's not the accurate mode. But regardless of what you're using, just make sure you're using warm color temperature. Again, all this however you want it. And then when you apply warm, it automatically does the -3, -15. But again, I suggest you use Dolby Dark. So that's the more accurate setting. So now let me just click over through a couple of pictures here and adjust the aperture so you can see it. Again, this is all Dolby Vision. Okay, alright, now I'm going to switch to HDR. Alright, now I'm going to assume that you have not gotten the Kalman for Bravia app to unlock the custom for Pro 1 and custom for Pro 2 modes. So we're going to set this up as if you haven't done that. Also, none of this has anything to do with the service menu. The service menu is reset back to default, so you don't have to go on the service menu. This is all user menu. It's all one simple change for everything. So you're going to use custom mode for HDR, because in HDR you only need one mode, whether it's daytime or nighttime. It's just a set standard, that's it. You're going to have pretty much, again, default, gradation preferred on your tone mapping. We're going to come through color, again, make sure it's on warm. Clarity settings, personal preference, put that on auto. Now, in HDR, you can occasionally see some gradation. So, HDR10, I would use smooth gradation on low. Motion settings, again, you can use smoothness, but don't use clearness when you're in HDR. All your video signal stuff, just always leave on auto. And then again, here, just showing when you set it to warm, it automatically applied -3 green, -15 blue. It saves it. See, everything else still default 0 and no color settings. That's it for HDR TV and movie viewing. Just use that. Now for games, the game mode is shared between SDR and HDR. However, it will remember the brightness settings and separate those automatically. So again, just pretty much leave that alone. Make sure it's on color temperature warm. Reality creation, you can go ahead and put on auto or however you want it for gaming. Now here, because there is posterization, now that there was an update that helped the posterization in HDR gaming, and it's definitely improved a lot. However, if you set it to medium, there's pretty much none. You will almost never see any banding in bright skies in games, and it really doesn't eliminate any detail that you would ever notice. I mean, I've checked a bunch of games, a bunch of areas, really fine textures. I don't see any change. So go ahead and put smooth gradation to medium for your game mode. Motion should be disabled. Again, this is all auto. And again, you'll see -3 green, -15 blue automatically applied. So now we are done with HDR. That should be all you need. So just show these again. Actually, got an extra one here for HDR. Alright, now we're going to switch over to SDR content. Alright, so now for SDR, since we used custom for HDR, we're going to use standard for our bright room. I'm going to have to adjust this. Alright, so standard is either super bright room or cable and sports, that kind of setup. So this is going to be maxed out brightness for SDR with peak luminance high. This is just if you wanted to max it out. This is around 400 nits in SDR, which is really bright. Now if you want to drop it down to medium, go ahead. Again, this is just for daytime casual watching, nothing important. But again, keep the color temperature at warm. Since this is probably going to be like for cable stuff, put reality creation on auto again, and then the noise reductions in lower quality content I actually find does a pretty good job if you leave both of them in auto. Smooth gradation you don't need in SDR. Now motion settings, if you do clearness 1, you don't actually really lose any brightness, you actually gain a little bit. In SDR, it does not work that way in HDR, but in SDR, clearness 1, you actually gain a few nits, so you don't lose anything. And then if you're doing sports, you probably want smoothness up a little bit higher. So that's what I would say to use. Again, keep this on auto. And then again, our -3, -15 still applies. And that's your bright room, cable watching, whatever SDR setup. And now we're going to use cinema for your critical SDR viewing, your nighttime viewing, that kind of thing. However, we're setting this up for around 170 nits for 100 white and 200, just over 200 nits for peak white. This will track along roughly the same as HDR and Dolby Vision. So aside from the highlights, everything else looks very similar. So we're going to do brightness at 30. Now in cinema mode, I'm sure you've probably heard if you've looked around that gamma 0 is 2.2. That's correct for just about every other mode. However, cinema is a little bit darker. So you actually want to put your gamma to 1, and that's going to give you a gamma of around 2.27 to 2.3. So it's a little bit darker. It's kind of right in between that 2.4, 2.2. So go ahead and do 1 on the gamma for cinema mode. Again, brightness at 30. And your peak luminance at medium. So color temperature, you guessed it, warm. Again, if you want to come back later, apply your live color and mess around and do that stuff, you go right ahead. Reality creation, again, I'm going to put that on auto. I watch a lot of older regular Blu-rays or and such from the early 2000s, 90s, things like that have a lot of noise and grain. So I do use these on auto. You can set them however you would like. Again, SDR, you don't really need smooth gradation. And then I would use clearness 1 and smoothness 1. That's my personal preference for SDR TV and movie viewing. And here you go again. The warm color temperature automatically applies the -3, -15. Again, see, this is all default 0. So I showed at the beginning of this video all the graphs and charts and stuff of how it all measures. So you can see everything is kosher. Gave the brightness measurements and all that. Alright, so now for SDR, it shares game mode between SDR and HDR aside from the brightness. So just set your brightness to 30 and medium. So again, this setup for the warm color temperature with the -3 green and the -15 blue, that was figured with peak luminance at medium and brightness at 30. So if you want to change the brightness setting a little bit, okay, but the more you change it, the more that it could affect the white point and the color temperature, but I measured standard with everything on max as well, the max brightness and peak luminance on high, and it was still pretty close, so it's not that big a deal. So feel free to adjust the brightness to your environment. So again, here's warm, game mode. Like I said, all this is going to be the same as it was in the HDR. So, I mean, there's really not much to do here. It's really simple. That's the whole point of this whole guide, is to make it very simple, very easy. You set everything one time, and then it's all set and done for you for all your content. And that's it. That's all you need for SDR. Remember, we used custom mode for HDR, and the reason we do that is so that if you want to have the clearness setting on your motion for SDR, but you don't want it to be using it in HDR, there's really no way around that other than use different picture modes. Now, if you don't like clearness or you don't care about it, you could just set custom up the same way you did game, where you do your brightness and everything for custom mode. So you would do medium peak luminance, 30 brightness, gamma 0, and then you could use this instead of cinema. And then when you switch over to HDR content, it's automatically going to boost the brightness up. And you could just do that. Either way, it's up to you. Personally, I like to use clearness, so that's why I use cinema for my SDR TV and movie viewing, and then set custom up for HDR. So just scroll through here a little bit, show a couple scenes. Try not to clip the camera here. So everything is very clean, very natural. Skin tones look great. White is very pure white. So, alright, so that's it. I hope this helps you out. This is what I fully recommend. If you're not getting a calibration done and you have an A80J, you just do what I showed in this video, and then we're done. That's it. A80J is now covered as far as non-calibration stuff. This will be the final settings video. You don't have to go into the service menu, just all user menu. And like I said, it's very easy, very simple, and it applies to all content so that there's no mismatch in how things look when you go from SDR to HDR or Dolby Vision. So I will have more advanced stuff like Calman AutoCal calibration guide for the A80J, as well as a manual calibration with the service menu and all of that coming up. But for the majority of you, this is all you need. So if like this video, please press the like button. That would be greatly appreciated. And just keep an eye out for more content. Thank you all for watching. Hope you have a good one, and I'll catch you in the next one.